you know, vampires, you know, obviously this show is bringing them back to a global audience as fearful creatures. You know, in doing so, you must be obviously calling on a lifetime of knowledge of vampires and of fantasies that you've had. Can you talk about your own history with them and how, you know, you've sort of cultivated this particular breed of vampire?
Yeah, and when I was a child, I started collecting not only horror fiction but horror facts. I started collecting folklore, mythology from all over the world. I was a child in the 1970s, so it was a heightened point of sort of the weird overtaking literature. You know, you have people were re-evaluating Charles Fort, you have Eric von Daniken, you have Colin Wilson, you have Jacques Vergier in France, and there was a lot of explosion of sort of deep mythology, strange mythology. There was an author that particularly influenced me called Bernard J. Herwood, and he put out a gorgeous book called Passport to the Supernatural. In it, he had collected myths of vampiric lore from China, India, America, Europe, and he recommended a few readings that I tracked down religiously. In pre-internet time, it was a true hunting expedition, like the books of Dom Agustin Calmet, Montague Summers. They were both church officials or priests that were interested in the occult. One of them chronicled the vampiric lore that had happened in his time and before his time, trying to specifically address different types of vampires in Eastern Europe. The other one did the vampires Kith and Kin, the vampire in Europe, went deep into werewolf mythology and so forth. And I continued collecting vampiric facts. I have a whole room, and you know, I have a library that is 2 houses. That's my library. It's 11,000 square feet of books, and I have one whole room dedicated to vampire and werewolf mythology, and not fiction, just mythology. And I can talk to you about the variations between Indian vampires, Filipino vampires, the Penangalang, the Strigoi, the Upir, you know, and each of them is different. The Mexican vampire, which is hairless like a Chihuahua. Each of the countries reinvents the vampire because the vampire, like the dragon, represents something really deeply ingrained in us. My theory is that it represents a collective memory of a time when we were cannibalistic apes, and we ate each other, and we started to try to mythologize those tendencies through werewolf and vampire myth. But anyway, what you see on the screen is decades and decades of studios, completely obsessive lore and fact and biology imagination on my part. I've been dreaming on how vampires are turned for decades. When I was working for my father on a real estate business, I would work from 8 in the morning to like 4 in the afternoon selling apartments, and I would sit in the model home with a pile of vampire lore, just making notes about Strigoi and stingers under the tongue, and then may I show you the tile is fantastic, and then I would go out and I worked there for 3 years, and a lot of the notes came out of that period.
Maybe you can publish them someday?
Well, they are published in a book, part of them called Cabinet of Curiosities.
Yeah.
It publishes some of my notebooks, some of them are that old. And the other thing that was important is I also was obsessed about the idea of religion and vampirism. Some of it made into Chronos, some of it makes it into the 3rd book of the strain. So,
since you brought up Chronos, I had a question concerning immortality and vampirism, which Chronos touches on. The De La Guardia character.
De La Guardia.
De La Guardia. Did he inspire the Eldritch character?
Of course.
They're
the same character.
Same character.
They are, you know what? Rich people have no concept of the real world when they get too rich. I don't fucking understand how someone can have billions of dollars and think that is even reasonable. I just don't understand it. The same way that they would like to live forever no matter what the fuck happens to the world. So I find it really, really disgusting that someone really continues accumulating billions and it's just a number in a piece of paper. They're not going to spend it. They're not going to get laid more. They're not going to buy another house. They're not going to get another yacht. There's no possible reflection in the real world of how their lives are affected by that amount of money. And the same is true of the desire of immortality. Why the fuck do you want to live forever? Who wants to live forever? What do you have to offer to the world that would make you feel you deserve to live forever? The perfect actor to answer that is a billionaire who is as obscenely thirsty of life as he is obscenely thirsty of money. So they are the same. And I try to make them the same. I try to make them hollow, that they have somebody else's kidney, that they are being scooped out and they've been filled with the organs of other people to represent what I feel about those characters. Now this said, it's done in the spirit of genre, but that's the way I read those characters myself.
It's a great character.
It's like the character in Chrono says, that fucker does nothing but shit and piss all day and he wants to live longer. That's what Ron says about his uncle.
Can you talk about the development of the strain, and was it originally did you always think of it as a TV show, or?
Yeah. I pitched it to Fox in '06. I pitched it with the airplane arriving and the death passengers and so forth, and I created a Bible of an arc of 3 acts, and it could go from 3 to 5 seasons. They rated, we went up the food chain all the way up, and then they said, we don't like it. Would you turn it into a comedy? I said, no. So I go and grab my little Bible, and I meet with Chuck Hogan, and I said, let's write it 50-50. You write some chapters, I write some others. We said yes, and we did it on a handshake deal. We didn't do papers, we didn't do contracts. We just went, let's do it. He wrote, I wrote. We didn't go to a publisher. We ended up going to HarperCollins with the book finished, and they said, we'll buy it. And then what happens is it comes out, the 3 books did very, very well, and we didn't want to sell it to TV until we finished the 3rd book, so we wouldn't be careful about what we wrote. We said, if we want, there are scenes in the 1st book, people think stuff is disturbing on what has aired. Chuck had much more disturbing stuff on his side of the chapters in the book, if you've read it. But at the end of the day, we came back full circle, adapted it as a comic book in Dark Horse. If you read the comic, we are involved on every decision in that comic, the story, the line work, the inking, the covers, the color work, the writing, everything. So after doing that, we shopped it around, and in one day we shopped it around all the cable networks. All of them wanted it. All of them wanted it. And then we said, we went with FX, which Landgraf had read the 3 books, understood it perfectly, and wanted to go for it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.